So we are very delighted to have with us Sir Murthy Sir, the National Coordinator of IKS Division, and Madam Dr. Satyagiri Madam, the Head of TKDL Unit, and Sir Anil Sir, Senior Scientist. So today we will have two sessions. The first, Sir will take an overview of IKS, what IKS does to me, what does IKS mean, what its vision, objectives, which framework we are using as a researcher, what are the framework we should take. Then, Madam will explore the different vast area of TKDL traditional knowledge and how we can protect our traditional knowledge through our different legal laws and other aspects. Madam will explore. So, Pranam sir, over to you. Please start your session.
Yeah. Dhanyawad, Piyusha. Namaste, everyone. Namaste, everyone. And it's a great pleasure to be back. And great to see that there is much continuing interest in the TKDL workshops. And thank you all for joining. And I hope you all stick to the schedules and exams and everything and get your certificates at the end. And hopefully, you'll all do well and take this knowledge and put it into practice in your research domains. So without much further ado, I'm audible, right? Yes. Okay.
Yes,
Yes,
yeah.
sir.
I will
Yes, proceed.
basically talk about the Indian knowledge systems. And thank you, Piyush, for that introduction. And then I will get started with what is this Indian knowledge system that we keep talking about and what is its relevance and importance in a changing world. So essentially, I'll be talking about what is IKS, why is it relevant today, how should we teach IKS, and how will it help our students, basically our nation and the world. And one of the things that we start off with the IKS, the way that we approach Indian knowledge systems, is essentially, again, looking back into what our Mahakavi Kalidasa said once. He said in Madhavagnimitram, Puranamityeva sadhu sarvam nachapi kavyam navamityavadyam santah pariksham tyatarad bhajante modah para pratyayane buddhihi. What he's basically he tried to say through that was that, I mean, he was trying to uh, many people are saying there is no audio. Is there no audio?
Yes, it's
Am I
audible,
audible?
sir. I can check
We
once.
can hear you.
Okay. So it is audible, right?
Yes, it is.
Yes, sir.
Okay, excellent. Okay. So basically, what Kalidasa was trying to say was that just because something is old, he was saying in the context of his poetry, that just because something is old does not mean that you should be basically considering that as gold. Whereas, and then just because something is new, you should not discard it because this is that old is gold type adage that normally people talk about. He says it's not necessarily so. You have to really look at everything based on their own merits, and then after examination based on their own merits, then accept the aspects that are useful for you. Essentially, that is what the way of Santa or the wise people. Whereas on the other hand, the Mudaha, the fools will be basically led by the opinions of others, essentially, is what Mahakavi Kalidasa is trying to say here. So, if you look at today's world, we are essentially facing existential challenges. And for example, some of the existential challenges that you can see there are that we are going to be 10 billion people in another 25 years. So while we talk about Viksit Bharat, and then we are talking about, yes, how we want to be a developed nation, the larger geopolitical context is that there will be another 2.5 billion people in the world. And how do we, and then the earth is not increasing in terms of its resources. So we have to feed them. We have to make sure that we have provide enough water to everybody and then also meet all the resources. So then essentially we are basically head to head with what we talk about in systems analysis as limits to growth. So that is essentially there is a limit to the amount of growth that we can have, and that poses existential challenges because we want to provide enough food for everybody, water for everybody, and resources also for everybody in a planet with shrinking resources. And how are we addressing currently? Most of the approaches, unfortunately, are like the six blind men. and the elephant. So everybody, we are basically is trying to do this from their own particular discipline. And what that really means is that, I mean, we are not able to see the larger context, and often the kind of solutions that we come up with are very limited. And therefore, there is a need for this kind of systemic approaches. And then, whenever we talk about these systemic approaches and then we talk about developing new solutions, it basically has to be that uh, basically that the lion makers from the Panchatantra are basically something of that thing. We should not create new problems uh, rather from while trying to solve the existing problems. You should not solutions should not lead to new problems. So that is something that we have to keep in mind. And when we talk about Indian knowledge systems, essentially it is that body of knowledge system that has that arose in the Indian subcontinent, in the basically the entire Bharat, based on the Vijnana, the basically day-to-day experiences of the people of Bharat through several millennia, and which was essentially documented in many languages of Bharat, and which led to these interactions, led to consolidation of these experiences into mental models, which is essentially the jnana, and which was transmitted through oral, textual, and artistical traditions, and then which were distilled into basically the Jivana Darshana, or the uh, basically the life philosophy that we talk about. And that essentially is what we are talking about. And this Jivana Darshana, the outlook of the life itself, is essentially something that again flows back. So the idea is through the interactions with the physical world, the Vijnana, that gets distilled into Jnana, the mental models, and then which basically becomes the Jivana Darshan, or the philosophy of life itself. And then from the physical, basically that philosophical perspective of Jivana Darshana, that informs the mental models, and then that comes back to again to practices through the Vijnana. So essentially, it is a two-way thing that goes back and forth. And that essentially is something that makes this knowledge system uniquely Bharatiya or Indian. And each of these things actually have the reflection in various disciplines. For example, when we talk about Jivana Darshan, the philosophical outlook, it will be the disciplinary outlook, or the Jivana Drishti, or the Drishti, that makes a particular discipline Bharatiya. So, for example, if you talk about mathematics as Indian mathematics, what makes it Indian is that Drishti. What makes the medicine or the Ayurveda the India Bharatiya is the Drishti. And similarly, any Rasayan Shastra, Bharatiya is Drishti. If you're talking about aesthetics, what makes them Bharatiya is that Drishti. And then we have the Jnana, that knowledge has been transmitted through various paramparas, transmissions of knowledge. Essentially, that is the parampara, Jnana parampara that flows. And then all of this vijnana, the practical interactions that we have with the world, and then the what we observe in the world, lead to typical some kind of practical utilities, laukika prayojana. So these are the three reflections of the fundamental things that are essentially the vijnana, jnana, and jivana darshana. So at the core are these three, and from that you see the various manifestations of this in various disciplines as drishti, parampara, and laukika prayojana. So, for example, the basically, if you look at Ayurveda, the drishti will be for the swastasya swasthya rakshanam, to protect the health of the healthy, and then the parampara is all the brahatrayi, laghutrayi, all these texts, and the prayojana is for making sure that the health is protected and health is maintained, so that the dharma, the Churveda Purusharthas are attained. So that is the Jivana Darshana Drishti that comes in. And then from that, the Parampara and the Laukika Prayojana comes in terms of the protecting the health itself. So that's how essentially these three things flow. And so if you think about it, this Parampara itself has three aspects to it. First of all, it is, of course, about preservation of knowledge and preservation of whatever is the existing knowledge. And then the second thing is about the transmission, which is essentially how do we transmit the existing knowledge frameworks, mental models to others. And that for that, we'll have to adopt different methods based on the times. So, for example, the kind of methodologies that we are, for example, right now, we are essentially using a internet-based method learning approach. This would not have been possible even 50 years ago. 100 years ago, no computer was there. So you have to be sitting in front of a teacher to learn. So with we have with the changing times and technologies, we are adopting new methods to transmit this knowledge. You see, that's essentially how we have to adopt even in IKS. It happened. It has happened in every discipline. This also has happened in the IKS also. Then these are only two parts. The one is preservation of the knowledge itself, and then second thing is the transmission. And then the third is essentially the creation. So if you talk about any jnana parampara, if you talk about any learning tradition, the knowledge creation has to be continuous. And that has been continuous in IKS. Therefore, whenever we talk about Indian knowledge systems, we are not talking about history. So please note that this is not about history of what India did, and this is not history of science kind of a course. This is essentially a course which are these are essentially a disciplines, a set of disciplines which is essentially about learning this continuous thread of knowledge that has been unbroken since time immemorial. And it is not limited to Vedas, Upanishads, and Puranas, or Bhagavad Gita, or Hindu studies. This is much more comprehensive than all of that. And that is what is Indian knowledge systems. So when we talk about Indian knowledge systems, we are talking about, the parampara in the Indian knowledge systems. We are talking about the preservation, not just of the manuscripts and things like that, but also the drishti. That is the core of that knowledge system. That makes it unique. And Bharatiya is a Bharatiya drishti. And transmission, and then the creation. So therefore, when you think about all of these three triad for parampara, you will very quickly realize that this is not about history, or this is not about basically Hindu studies, or limited to Vedas and Upanishads and things like that. It is essentially a continuous creation of knowledge in the IKS. Am I audible? I see messages that I'm not audible many times.
You are audible, sir.
Yes.
I'm audible?
Yes, sir. You're quite audible.
Maybe I'll do one thing. I'll switch off the video. Perhaps maybe some people can hear better.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. And then what is this Bharatiya Drishti that we are talking about? So essentially, if you think about it, there are that makes it uniquely Bharatiya. Is there are any whenever we look at anything, we look at three levels of reality. First is the physical reality, Adhibhautika reality, and then there is Adhidaivika reality, which is at a mental plane, and then Adhyatmika plane, which is at a spiritual or a that divine plane. Essentially, we look at everything from these three perspectives: Adhibhautika, Adhidaivika, and Adhyatmika. And then for anything that we endeavor, strive for in life, there are essentially only four goals that you can think about. Those are essentially the four purusharthas: the dharma, artha, kama, and moksha. The development of the physical and the laukika, the worldly, this thing is the artha kama, and then of the spiritual mind is essentially about the moksha. So basically, what we are talking about is dharma, artha, kama, and moksha, which all of those in the framework of the dharma. So when we talk about dharma, artha, and kama for the physical world, and then the moksha for the spiritual world, within the framework of dharma, these are the four goals of life essentially. And then what are the four ashramas? These are four stages of life. The initial stage of brahmacharya, where we are trying to really get education and learn skills, and grihastha, which is essentially about learning and then using that knowledge that we have learned and put that into practice, and then support a family, and then raise a family, and then support the society. That is essentially the grihastha. And then after that, basically giving it up and going back, and retirement life essentially in the vanaprastha, and the sannyasa is the fourth ashrama, where you basically look at the entire world. And this is essentially the three things that we look at in any Bharatiya drishti. So any topic is analyzed through these three lenses, and then that makes it uniquely Bharatiya as well. So this is one perspective that we can really look into. And then why is it that we need to really look at these things? Is essentially, why is it necessary that higher education institutions should be looking at it? Because there is really a scarcity of genuine scholarship. And because of that, there are many myths and unscientific claims. There are people who will claim there is string theory mentioned in Bhagavad Gita because of that shloka in 7th chapter, which says, Mattah parataram nasti kinchidasti dhananjaya, mai sarvamidam protam sutre manigana iva. Sutra is translated as a string, and then they will say, oh, now see, they are saying strings are everywhere, therefore this is string theory. Or on the other hand, you have critics who will say, oh, Indian science is a myth, Indian math was not rigorous, they did not have a concept of proof, without really understanding or looking at the texts themselves. So these two kind of extreme positions, as we know in academy as academicians, are not really tenable. Neither of them is true. The truth lies somewhere in between. It is neither that we have everything in Indian knowledge systems, nor is it that it was not rigorous and we learned everything from the West. None of those claims are true. So therefore, it is critical for the HEIs to take the leadership in this. Because if you have to understand and research the scientific and technological heritage of India, and not just scientific and technological heritage, but even the linguistics and other humanities aspects of sciences, human social sciences aspects. So it really, we need HEIs to take that leadership. And then NEP places a great deal of this thing emphasis on multidisciplinary and multilinguistic learning of technical subjects. Therefore, it is really important that we all understand what is Indian knowledge systems in the proper perspective and then put it into practice in our professional lives. And it talks, for example, the NEP talks about the Indian knowledge systems, and even in fact, in the very first paragraph, it says the rich heritage of ancient and eternal Indian knowledge and thought has been the guiding light for this policy. And it talks about it in multiple sections, whether it be in section 4, section 11, section 17, 22, 20, all of those different places, on touching upon various aspects of research, education, and curricular integration kind of things. And so basically, when you look at the Indian knowledge systems, it provides a unique perspective and is holistic, rigorous, and innovative in its approach. Therefore, this is something that is very valuable for our students, because the kind of challenges that our students basically will be facing 20 years down the line, it is very difficult for us to predict today. What we can really do is we can empower them by giving them tools to help them solve the problems in future. For example, if you think about your own education or our own education, when we were educated in 20 years ago, 30 years ago, we did not have this. 30 years ago, we did not have this problem of basically anxiety, depression driven by the social media addiction, because social media just was not invented 30 years ago. And so we did not even have these problems. Now we are in the driving seat, and then we have to right now solve these challenges. So similarly, but then our education had prepared us for this, so we are basically somewhat able to do some things about it. So similarly, if you want our students to be responding to the challenges that come up in future, all we can do is we can essentially give them tools so that they can essentially solve those problems as they come up. And for that, it will be important for us to provide them with tools. What are the tools that we can provide? The tools will be, how do you look at something from a unique perspective? Of course, we are used to teaching them the scientific paradigms. Can we also teach them the Indian knowledge systems paradigm? That will give them a different perspective to look at the problems. And of course, these are holistic, because they again are systemic things, and that is the nature of the problems that we are getting. Therefore, it is important to have holistic approaches and innovative approaches, and also that are rigorous. So these are things that will actually empower our students to solve the future challenges. So therefore, it is important, not just because we want to be proud about our Indian knowledge heritage, which is true, but also it is a future looking thing where we want to really train our students to be the best in the world. And for that, we have to empower them to have these unique perspectives, which can be provided by the Indian knowledge systems. Therefore, there is this uniqueness of Bharati Drishti, multidisciplinary and holistic approaches, which are grounded in reality, and holy tradition of rigorous inquiry and then innovative approaches. Just to think about how the Drishti can make a big difference. If you think about capitalism today, what does capitalism talk about? Pure profit maximization, nothing else. Profit maximization, if I have to put it in two words, it would be Shuddha Labh. Shuddha Labh, pure profit. That's basically what it is. What will a system that practices only pure profit do? Basically, unbridled capitalism will lead to only maximization of profit, because that is what the system is geared to do. And then it will necessarily lead to exploitation of the humans and nature, because there is no other measure of success other than profit maximization. So there is no concern for other human beings or nature in such a system. And it will also lead to pseudo democracies. We are seeing that in the West now. But what happened when the capitalism was at its peak? In fact, it was in 17th and 18th century London. What happened was, then there were a lot of workers who were exploited. The appalling working conditions and things like that. Really, the capitalists were exploiting the workers. It was in such a situation that Karl Marx was in London, and then he wrote the Communist Manifesto. He came up with this communism system, which basically said, "Oh, pure profit maximization is wrong. We'll go the other way." So then the pendulum swung the other way. So he proposed a system of communism which talks about shunya labh, no profit at all. There will be no profit. Nobody will work for profit. Every government will provide work for everybody. Therefore, everybody should get equal share and everything. But what does this lead to? This will lead to stifling of innovation and entrepreneurship because there is no incentive for anybody to work hard in such a system. And again, it will lead to exploitation of human nature. And as we saw in USSR, we are seeing in China, North Korea, Cuba, dictatorships. That is what it will lead to. So capitalism, on one hand, is only maximization of profit, whereas communism will stifle the innovation and entrepreneurship. What was the Bharatiya model? What was the Indian model in this? We talked about Shubha Labh. Shubha Labh basically is a concept where we say, essentially, we can talk about it as ethical economics or something like that. There is no really good English translation for that, so I'm using the words as they are. Shubha Labh. Labha is profit, of course, and then Shubha means welfare. Welfare for everybody, including myself, and a labh for me. So if I'm getting into a business, I want profit for myself, but I want the welfare of everybody, including my customers, suppliers, producers, everybody. We should be happy. That is essentially the Bharatiya model. That is why you see on our homes written Shubha Labh. So because there is that kind of a control of this thing, check by the dharma framework, which makes sure that there is Shubha for everybody, there is no exploitation possible. You cannot sell adulterated goods in a Shubha Labh framework because you cannot just do that. But then at the same time, it doesn't say, okay, there is no negation of wealth creation. We do basically do the puja of Lakshmi ji. So wealth is worshipped, but it is not the unbridled profit maximization. That is not there. So therefore, there is a kind of a check and balances in such a system. This is what enabled India to lead the world for about 1.5 millennia with 25% GDP of world GDP. And imagine that even at the peak of US power in 1960s and 70s, the US share of world's GDP was only 16%. So that is what enabled us. And what enabled this entire Bharatiya thinking was basically economic superpower of Bharat for 1.5 millennia was the Shubha Labh concept. And that came from the Indian knowledge systems. Again, which arose because of the Bharatiya Drishti, the Jnana Parampara, and then the Laukika Prayojana. All of that were informed by the Jivana Darshana, the Jnana, and then the Vijnana of the Bharatiyas, of the Indians. Now think about it at a personal level. Right now, the only model that we know of is a maximum consumption based economy where everything is about consumption. So again, bigger house, bigger salary, bigger things, all of that pursuit of consumption will lead to exploitation of nature, unlimited growth paradigm on a limited planet. And then because there will be inequalities, it will lead to societal discord. Whereas Bharat had a model of pursuit of ananda, happiness, and there we talk about thriving with nature. Growth, of course, growth is necessary, but something that meets the needs of all and societal harmony. You see how the perspective change, the drishti change, can bring such a profound differences in what is very, very worldly system like an economic system. This is what is the necessity of the IKS for. It is true that we have discovered Pythagoras theorem 300 years or 500 years before Pythagoras. True. That is there. We have discovered the Newton-Gregory series by Madhava was discovered in Kerala 300 years before Newton and Gregory. That is also true. We have discovered binary numbers. Pingala discovered these things and came up with algorithms 2,000 years ago before other people have done in the West. All that is true and fact. But then we should feel definitely be proud of it. But then the point is that is actually quite small thing compared to this difference in the drishti, because this change in perspective is actually the core. This is what will help us to solve the future problems, and this is where the focus of any teaching of the Indian knowledge system should be. And then same thing with the healthcare. Allopathy talks about treatment of diseases, whereas Ayurveda talks about pursuit of swasthya or pursuit of health. And there you have very different systems. You have an integrated system of basically health in Ayurveda, which not only talks about treatment of disease, it will also talk about what should you eat, when should you sleep, how should you sleep, achara, vyavahara, vihara, all of those things are part of Ayurveda. Whereas allopathy, the only thing is, yes, there is a disease, we take a medicine and then we are done. That's the extent of healthcare in allopathy. So look at the kind of differences that we can have. Again, the approach is also different. In Ayurveda, we take the systemic approaches based on the Vata, Pitta, Kapha. And then in allopathy, it is much more reductionist approaches. And the idea is we need a combination of such approaches sometimes. It is not that one is better, one is bad, or things like that. It is really a combination that is required. Then, therefore, this Bharatiya Drishti, I hope I'm able to convince you that is really unique, and that is what we should be focusing on when we talk about any knowledge system as we go forward. And then, why is this IKS relevant? In addition to, of course, our ancestors discovering some of the things much before others. This is the important part for the future. And then if you look into agriculture, this is essentially agriculture and trade was something that was very important for the world. All those areas that you see encircled there in the basically Arabian Sea and in the Bay of Bengal and in Indian Ocean, those were the areas where Indians used to trade much before Europeans came to our shores. And we had a thriving trade across all of these things, these oceans. And for that, you need, for such a trade to happen and prosper, you need a very precise sense of direction, what we call as three things: Desha, Kala, and Dik. Dik is the direction, Desha is the location on the globe, and then the Kala is the time. If you know these three things, you can basically navigate to any part of the world. And this is essentially what was the entire thing of the Panchanga was about. And then agriculture also, if you have agriculture, that is basically the foundation for all the prosperity of the society, because agriculture, if you can provide surplus food, that will free the rest of the people in the society to actually do the trading and do the artistry and other things. So therefore, surplus productivity, ensuring surplus productivity in agriculture and ability to locate ourselves on the globe were two very important things for the prosperity, and that lay at the root of the India's prosperity. And for that, we needed to understand the weather. And if you look into agriculture, basically, at least there is archaeological evidence of agriculture for 10,000 years. And if you look at how the basically the entire grains were domesticated, it was barley, then came the wheat, then came basically the ragi, tur dal, basically chana dal, basically then we have flaxseed and cotton. They were all domesticated in the second tier crops, and then finally came the rice. This was the most recent basically domesticated crop, maybe about 4,000 years ago. And people say that it was domesticated simultaneously in China and in India at the same time. But I mean, there is all kinds of evidence there, and still it is a matter of debate. And you know, because water was so important for agriculture, it was basically something that was very keenly observed, the water cycles. And in fact, even if you go to Shatapatha Brahmana of Shukla Yajurveda, there we talk about water cycles, basically the Agnirve Dhomo Jayate Dhomat Abhramaha Abhrat Vrushti. So fire creates vapors, the heat creates vapors, and the vapor creates the cloud, and cloud gives the rain, is something that is mentioned there. And then it was considered, rainfall was considered Purvachitti in the Vedas. And then if you look into how the water, weather, and all of these things were predicted, the Rishi Kashyapa, Parashara, Gautama, Vatsa, they're all really known for their weather prediction methods. Both the short and the long-term weather forecasts were done. And in fact, one of the earliest texts on agriculture, Krishi Parashara, talks about long-term and short-term predictions, 6 to 7 months in advance. And this is again repeated in Brihat Samhita by Varah Mihira, where he calls it as Garbhottama, and very similar to what we do in the modern weather forecasting. And there are different methods, algorithms that are there. I will not get into that in detail for today. I will share the slides so you can take a look at it. But many methods are given. For example, in Krishi Parashara, Brihat Samhita, there are different methods for looking at rainfall, and there are methods even in Arthashastra, Chanakya Arthashastra. And even when you look into any agriculture text, it talks about multiple things. For example, it talks about how we have to treat the animals very ethically and without basically causing any hardship to the animals. And similar things are there even in Kautilya's Arthashastra. So the point I'm trying to make through all of these things is that the disciplines that we talked about were, for example, when you talk about agriculture, there was Jyotisha involved in it, there was weather in it, there was water method, basically methods for water management. All of these things, essentially, these were all like holistic approaches to the discipline. It was not like one of those six blind men and the elephant type studies. It was essentially systemic approaches. And all of that leads to solutions that are much more holistic and much better, have a much better chances, higher chances of success when we look into the all the variations because of the weather and all of the uncertainties that are out there. And even think about this, and then the stories were beautiful. I mean, for example, this I am sure many of you must have heard about the story of Jivaka, who was the physician of Gautama Buddha. And there is a story associated with him where basically, I think it is Patanjali who goes and asks as a shuka or as a parrot. He says, Koruk, Koruk, Koruk. Koruk means who is healthy, who is disease free. And three times, Koruk, Koruk, Koruk. And the answer comes back as Hitabhuk, Mitabhuk, Rutubhuk. Hitabhuk is essentially somebody who eats, who is healthy, essentially somebody who eats in moderation, who eats what is good for the body, that is Hitabhuk, body and mind, and then eats in moderation, that is Mitabhuk, and then eats according to the seasons, that is the Rutubhuk. So Hitabhuk, Mitabhuk, Rutubhuk. And if you think about it, the entire concept of integral health and food and dietary habits is basically encoded in these six words. Really four words if you basically discount the repetition of Koruk two times. So Koruk, 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 Hitabhuk, Mitabhuk, Rutubhuk. Imagine the innovative approach that basically this was done. So Jivaka, this was Jivaka's answer to Patanjali's basically question. And Jivaka was Gautama Buddha's physician. And so I hope this is essentially again what the Indian knowledge system is about. So Vijnana, which is practiced in education, arts, administration, law, justice, and put into practice in all of these areas. And coming from the Jnana, which is transmitted through oral, textual, and artistic traditions, are documented in all languages of Bharat, basically being informed by the Jivana Darshana, which arises from the deep experience, observation, experimentation, and rigorous analysis. This triad is at the core, and each of their manifestations in various disciplines is as a drishti that makes it Bharatiya drishti, that makes that discipline uniquely Bharatiya or Indian. And then the parampara, the way that the knowledge was transmitted, and then the laukika prayojana, the practical utility of that discipline. So, where do you find all of this knowledge? Basically, you can look at both literary and non-literary sources of knowledge. Uh, whether it be the Chaturdasha Vidyasthanas, many of the texts, Buddhist literature, Jain literature, various art forms, oral traditions, folklore, food and life practices, health practices, all of these things. In fact, if you look at it, more than 95% of the literature in Sanskrit is about not about Vedas, Upanishads, and Puranas. It is about the basically Vyakarana, about linguistics. It is about the chemistry, mathematics, astronomy, architecture, engineering, and these kind of things. And then the code of living, Dharma Shastras, and then public administration. These are the kind of things that you find most of our texts in. And therefore, there is a need to dispel two things, two myths about Indian knowledge systems. That it is only the Vedic corpus that is Indian knowledge systems. It includes much more. And the second thing is it is only some kind of a spiritual literature. It is not. There are, as I said, more than 95% of the texts are about how do we live properly. So essentially, it is about the two of the Purusharthas, Artha and Kama, of course, within the framework of Dharma. And only 5% is devoted to that moksha, this thing, fourth Purushartha. But it's important to understand that. And whenever we talk about any Indian knowledge system sources, there are three kinds of sources that you can think about. One is the primary source text, whether that be in a manuscript, palm leaf manuscript, or a paper manuscript, or some other thing, and or copper plates. And the translated primary sources, which are translated into any of the Bharatiya bhashas or even in English. And then secondary sources are those kind of sources which are about commentary. For example, if I have to give you an example of this, primary source of Arthashastra, the primary source is a palm leaf manuscript that you can find in Mysore Oriental Research Institute, which is a library there. And in the translated primary source, you will find translated Arthashastra into various Indian languages, giving each shloka and their meaning and things like that. And then these days you find many books in the market that will say Chanakya Sutra or Economic Sutra or things like that. There are many books that are based on Arthashastra, but not really a literal translation. Those are all secondary sources. So this is essentially the kind of sources that we have. Resources, as I said, can be manuscripts, books, research papers, monographs, and they can be in many things. So one important thing that I would like you all to please keep in mind is that these primary sources are not uniform. So just like in any discipline, we have a primary text, like for example, you can have a treatise. A small aphoristic treatise is essentially called sutra, and bhashya is a commentary, vartika is a text of revisions and rejoinder, karika is a technical treatise, and vyakhya is a gloss. So different primary sources can be classified into all of these three things. So let's say if I have to give a very small example of how we learn our Newton's laws of motion and things like that, if I, or four laws of thermodynamics, you can just state those four laws of thermodynamics in one single sentence each. That is essentially the sutra. And of course, that will not be useful for teaching a kid or a student. You'll have to explain something. Why is it so? And that kind of a textbook is essentially a bhashya. And there can be first edition, second edition, and third edition. And the second edition or the third edition would be called a vartika. And then that is not sufficient. Many a times we also need examples, numerical examples. So worked out examples. That is a karika. And then a glossary is essentially the vyakhya on all of this entire thing. So we have to understand what is the nature of the text before we basically go into and try to pick up that text. So how do you really go for it? Identify a primary text, consult an expert, and then you should identify primary, multiple secondary sources. And then once you have evidence from multiple independent sources, you can be sure about the authenticity of the material that you have. And then, for example, this is an example of basically the agriculture as a system. You can see starts off all the way with Krishi Parashara, then comes with Kashipi, Krishi Sukti, all the way up to Nuskhe Dar Fanni Falahat in Farsi in 17th century, and then Krishi Gita in 18th century, so on and so forth in Malayalam. So you will see all of these texts in multiple languages, building on top of each other and things like that. So, I mean, this is again another list of those texts that we have there. So what is it that I'm very happy to represent the Indian Knowledge Systems Division of the Ministry of Education, Government of India. Again, this is essentially the framework that we work with. And the vision of our division is to rejuvenate and mainstream Indian knowledge systems for the contemporary world. And the idea is to decolonize the Indian mind by generating interest and healthy critical reverence for the unbroken knowledge traditions of Bharat for the welfare of all. And so we have multiple interventions at multiple stages in the education system, as you can see. And from there, in the last 2.5 years, with the small team that we have been able to achieve some good impact across the country. And very happy to let you know that Government of India has announced that for next 5 years, the IKS division will be supported with the increased funding. So all of the activities that you see there, we are going to do them many times more, because and then so we'll be looking to interact with you all. And the idea is to ensure that empower teachers to become acharyas. That's essentially what we want to do. Shikshakas have to become acharyas. So any resources that we have, please do visit our website, iksindia.org. There are many course materials, outlines, lecture recordings, reference materials, 18 days worth of FDP. So many things are there. So you can learn from any of those materials, and you can get basically enrolled, enlisted in our email list. So we'll be able to send you some of our events that happen across the month, every month. And again, many faculty development programs and all of these things, we can help you with the networking and all of these things. And with that, I think basically leave you with these 4 things. Please do understand, study, and look into the Indian traditional wisdom. And please understand that IKS is not history studies or is not limited to religious studies. What makes IKS unique is the Bharatiya Drishti. It is inherently multidisciplinary, holistic in its approach. Therefore, that is the approach that we should be taking if we want to empower our students to solve the emerging and future problems of the world. With that, uh, invite you all to do your swadharma with a nishkama karma feeling, and for the loka sangraha, or basically for the welfare of the world, and which will essentially lead to the moksha. And Atmano Mokshardam Jagat cha, as the Dhyaya Vakya of Ramakrishna Mission says. And I just saw one comment which said we need more references. I will request you to please visit our website, iksindia.org. You can see that at the bottom of my slide there. If you go there, you actually have materials that you can freely download. We have created a lot of materials. In fact, there is also an associated website called Yaksha Prashna, which you can again navigate from iksindia.org, where you will be able to access more than 70,000 books for free. All of these things are available, and more than 1,500 articles. So many things are available for you. So with that, namaste everyone. Thank you.
Bahu dhanyavadah, sir. Thank you for this insightful lecture, and to help us know about IKS, the fundamental aspects of IKS. So we are trying to know the soul of IKS. Your lecture was based on to find out the soul of IKS. Thank you very much, sir.
Namaste.
And
always a pleasure.
Now, we just announced that after Madam's session, we'll have a short assessment. So please you participate in that assessment. I will share the link in the chat box. So, Madam, over to you. Please
I think there
give an
may be
overview of
people.
whole IKS workshop.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah, Professor Murthy, I think there may be some questions for you. So maybe you first take up the questions and then I can continue.
Oh, okay. Maybe we'll take, in the interest of time, maybe we'll take 3 or 4 questions right now, and any questions, we'll take it up later.
Yeah.
So, Piyush, it's
Yes.
your call. You please
Yes.
let us know which one.
There is a question, sir. What is the debate between Ayurveda and allopathy? It's from Ritesh.
Yeah, it's a very big debate as such, because you see, the framework of Ayurveda is very different from the framework of allopathy, and that is really at the root of the debate, if you call. Because what is happening is Ayurveda, so it is one thing, like, I mean, Ayurveda measures health in a very different aspect than what allopathy does. So the world outlook, the perspective itself of Ayurveda and allopathy are different, and what we are trying to do is fit one in the other, and therefore it will not fit. You're trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. That's a very classic example that we talk about. So it's not going to fit. So you have to understand that there is a square peg and there is a round hole. It won't fit. So we have to take them as they are. And that is what basically is the uh, benefit that you will have, because allopathy is not something that you can discard simply just by saying Ayurveda is great. Similarly, you cannot discard Ayurveda as pseudo-scientific. Both the approaches are wrong, really. Both have their own framework of looking at the world, because it is now you may say, why will they have different this thing approaches? Because you see, you can look at the same thing from 2 different angles, and then same truth can be looked at. Fact, see, there are, if I give you a set of facts, you can look at it and analyze it from multiple angles. And so the approach of Ayurveda is essentially the systemic approach, whereas allopathy takes a reductionist approach. Both the approaches have their value, and it is important that we understand that they're looking at the world differently. And there is a brilliant book right now. There is an emerging field called complexity science. Last 15 years, there has been a big upsurge in this discipline called complexity science. I would encourage people to go and take a look at some of the papers that are coming out in that complexity science. There you'll understand why this kind of a debate is happening. And then once you understand the fundamental things, it is not either allopathy or Ayurveda. It is, we need to understand and take both of them as we need. And what do I mean by that? If I have to go for a critical care, probably I'll go to an allopathy doctor in an emergency room. But if I have to be treated for a lifestyle disease, I'll kada. Basically, I'll take the kada and then basically go for that. So that's the kind of approaches that we will need to be thinking about. And it's already happening to a large extent. Thank you.
Then Namaste, Archana ji. Hello. Next. Namaste, Neetu ji. Could you please ask your question? Ajit ji,
There is somebody called Tamoghna
please
Mandal
ask.
who wrote, just let me read
Yes.
his question. Everything told by you coming from the Smriti Itihasas like Mahabharata and Gita spoken the Lord. So why it said that it's not about Puranas and Vedas? Is it wrong to give credibility to the original sources like Nishkama Moksha? No. So my point was very different. I'm not saying that whatever I have said is not from these Puranas and Itihasas or Vedic corpus. In fact, it is very, very strongly rooted in the Vedic philosophy. There is no this thing that I'm trying to go away from there. What I'm trying to tell you is there is people limit the Indian knowledge systems to only Vedas and Upanishads. That is wrong, is what I'm trying to say. It is not limited by that. This is a little bit more than that. So if I have to give you an example, it is like we know that Ganga comes from the Gangotri and it goes into the basically the Bay of Bengal. On the way, there is Yamuna that comes in, Sarayu comes in, and all of these rivers join in. So the source is Gangotri, where the Ganga comes from. So similarly, the source is the Vedic corpus. But then from there, we have all these additions of all these disciplines which come in, like Ayurveda, Dhanurveda, all the Shiksha Shastra, all of these things have come, Rasayana Shastra, all of these things have come in. And then we see all of this thing being added to that corpus. So to say that only Ganga at the Gangotri is Ganga, not in Bengal, is wrong. That is what I'm trying to say. Everything is Ganga. Everything is Indian knowledge systems. I'm not trying to reduce anything here. Neither am I shying away from the Vedic roots of Indian knowledge systems. I'm not.
Can I go to the next question, sir?
Please go ahead.
Mr. Himanshu is asking, if we were at the peak of science that we feel glory about today, then why aren't we still be able to achieve the same by today's advanced tools and methods?
See, it is not methods are something that keep evolving, and we should be using the methods. Whatever the modern methods that we have, we should be definitely be using all of that. So we are not saying the peak of science was in the past. That is again a very different type of a conception. And then neither are we conforming to saying that today is the peak of science. We are not saying this or that. We are saying let it be some in some areas the peak was in the past, some areas peak is today. So it is not that it was always we are not bounding ourselves to the linear concept of time. We are basically talking about a cyclical time. So here when I say this, I mean why is it that we are not able to achieve it with today's methods? I mean, see, the perspective also matters, right? We need to be having the proper perspective. And science, as we look at it, maybe that's a another discussion topic. If you look at the science today, it is essentially having only 1.5 pramanas. One, it is based on the pratyaksha pramana, and half of anumana pramana is inference. So as long as it relates to the pratyaksha pramana. In science today, we use primarily what is known as a third person inquiry, or which is basically the empiricism and the logic. We use these two combination method of these two things for most of our things. Although this was debunked by Kurt Gödel in 1930s, this was basically part of the Vienna Circle's thought process, and there was something called a Copenhagen interpretation. This is all in the context of the quantum physics that happened. So there were huge debates about this. So science, as we know today, is actually inadequate to to describe, for example, even basic thing like your happiness. Science cannot measure happiness. Why? Because it does not give place for what we call as a first person inquiry or the swanubhava. So anything that you experience, the what is it at the core of that is the separation of the observer and the observed. All of science is based on a separation between the observer and the observed. So when I do experiments, my experimental object is separate from me and I'm observing it, is the way that we do science. But basically there are what quantum physics has taught, that was a Copenhagen interpretation, is in fact, that is what even the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, all of these things get from there, is that you cannot disentangle the observer and the observed. And what does that mean? That means that you cannot observe a system without being separate from it. So therefore, the first person inquiry also has a place in some places, very important place. So science ignores all of that and calls it as a subjective experience. Unless you bring that into science, domain of science cannot be expanded. Even if you know entire science today, what we are talking about explains only what 5% of the universe. That is an accepted fact. None of the dark energy, dark matter, none of those things are basically explained by science, which is essentially the 95% of the universe. What we are talking about is 5% of the, everything that you talk about is 5% of the universe. And there is a place for science to increase its domain. And that's where perhaps the Swanubhava will come into place. So we are not saying that this is the peak. We are not saying past was the peak. We are trying to improve the methods and in exploration. It's really a celebration of life and exploration. That's what it is about. So maybe we'll just stop here.
Yes.
In the interest of
Yes.
time, I think we'd like to hear Vishwajanani's too. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much. Namaste, Piyush. Namaste, Vishwajanani. Namaste. Namaste.
Madam, over to you, please.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you. After a very, very interesting and informative presentation by Professor Murthy, I'm not sure whether I will be able to do justice to the workshop. Nevertheless, just let me know if it is visible. It's full screen, right?
Yes.
Yes, yes, madam.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Piyush, for the opportunity once again, Professor Murthy. I think the IKS-TKDL unit workshops are really strengthening in substance and as well as the expanse. Thank you so much for this cooperation. And moving on with my presentation, just let me.
Could you please check once his slides are moving or not? There is a mark comes up.
Yes, once again, what is that? Can you show the floating video window again? I don't have any video window. I'll say hide. So is it visible without any?
Yes, it's visible and moving. I think it's second slide. Could you please go to the first slide? Yes.
Okay, now I want to
On
do
this
second.
side, I think it's okay now.
All right. Yeah. Thank you so much again. As we progress and advance with technologies, there are a lot of glitches and perhaps ignorance on our side also to deal with these kind of changes. Anyway, once again, thank you so much. I guess you had a wonderful, informative session by Professor Murthy. He touched upon all the core principles of our Indian knowledge systems. And I refer to one of the questions that was in the chat box: is oral traditional knowledge a part of the Indian knowledge systems? Yes, it is a part of the Indian knowledge systems. So when we talk of the Indian knowledge systems, while the IKS division is focused on, creating and harnessing IKS to address the current and the future needs of India and as well as the globe, the world over, we from the CSIR, we've been handling a very important and unique initiative called the Traditional Knowledge Digital Library, that is the TKDL. And this was a collaborative effort of the CSIR and the Department of Indian Systems of Medicine and Homeopathy way back in the 2001. And it's a value-added database of traditional knowledge information from the country, largely to prevent misappropriation of Indian traditional knowledge. So with the interest that goes and runs between the two organizations related to the IKS, we thought it was important to collaborate and do something jointly for the welfare of all. And that's this workshop that you have registered to. Thank you so much to each one of the participants for joining us today. And the workshop will be for 5 days. It's about 1.5 hours every day, and you will have a short assessment questions at the end of the session. There will be a link that will be posted by Piyush and Anand from our side, and you will be assessed every day. And then on the 5th day, you have a specific assessment schedule as well. So the workshop is structured this way. You will get to hear about the expanse and significance of the Indian knowledge systems. That is what Professor Murthy and I would be doing today, and followed by the daily MCQ-based test. You will also have a brief question answer session today. And if not, you can post your questions in the chat box and we'll try to address it the next day. On day 2, you'll get to know about the fundamentals of the intellectual property rights. This is from a broad perspective, nothing specific to the Indian knowledge systems, but this will lay the foundation of understanding traditional knowledge in the context of intellectual property rights. So on day 3 and 4, we'll be talking about the traditional knowledge. Day 3 will be focused on the defensive and positive protection of traditional knowledge, especially in the context of biopiracy and misappropriation. Whereas on day 4, you will be getting to hear more about the ethics, the ethical aspects related to handling traditional knowledge. This is especially in the context of oral traditional knowledge and also manuscripts which are in private collection. On the 5th day, you'll just get to hear a little bit about the TK-inspired innovations, the potential and the road ahead, and you will have the final assessment. I think Piyush, you can correct me, only participants scoring 75% and above will be given the merit certificate.
Yes.
Piyush, I am right. Am I right?
Yes. Yes. Yes, ma'am.
All right. So this is the structure of the workshop. Sorry. So today you've already heard about the Indian knowledge systems and the expanse and the significance of it. Just give me a minute. So moving on, what I'll be trying to do today is to take you a little further and perhaps in a few subject areas, try to provide you a little more information than what Professor Modi touched upon. He touched upon the core principles, and that's very, very important. And what I will be showing you is only a glimpse of, what is the, some important aspects of our Indian knowledge systems. So you'll get to better appreciate our knowledge systems and perhaps take it up as a research project or perhaps even utilize it for maybe, for further any commercial use or otherwise. So when you talk of the Indian knowledge systems, I think we have been very, very fortunate because in India, I think perhaps it is one of the very few countries where our traditional knowledge systems has already been codified. And we have, in numerous texts, you take the Vedas, the Upanishads, the Sahityas, and even, the Indian knowledge systems with Ayurveda, Siddha, Unani, Charak Samhita, Shushra Samhita, Ashtanga Hridayam, the food that we eat. Then also in terms of agriculture, the Krishi Parashara, Vriksha Ayurveda, Lupupakara, even on cosmetics, there's a lot of information that has been codified. Well, this is one part of the traditional knowledge. The second and very important part is the oral traditional knowledge, because at some point of time, what we see today as a codified text has been oral traditional knowledge some many thousands of years ago. So we in India had followed the Guru Sishya Parampara, and also the traditional knowledge has been passed on from one generation to the other by word of mouth within the families or through even art forms. So you take music, you take the theatrical forms or even the dance forms. A lot of information has transmitted from many, many generations to now. And I think we are very, very fortunate that we still see all these traditions as part of our culture, and people still practice it. When you take the older generation, I've just given you a glimpse of all these old people who recently received the Padma Shri Award. They still carry on their traditions, and they have been recognized for the work that they do. And as Professor Murthy mentioned, everything is for a societal benefit. And that is how the Indian philosophy has spread across all these thousands of years and is still valid today. While we talk of this codified text, in the form of books and the oral traditional knowledge, somewhere in between falls the manuscripts. Also, although the manuscripts have been the mothers for the text, these manuscripts are kind of very sensitive because in today's context, perhaps most of them are in a state which are on the point of decay. So the National Mission for Manuscripts under the IGNCA, the Ministry of Culture, has been able to document or digitize almost like 45 lakh manuscripts, and of them, almost like 65 different rare and unpublished manuscripts are also part of this entire collection. So if you go and visit the National Mission for Manuscripts, you'll be able to lay your hands on the National Database of Manuscripts of almost about 34 lakh manuscripts. And this is basically providing you a catalog of what is there in our knowledge systems. So when we talk of the Ayurveda, I did mention, right, there are so many texts, and I think you might have heard about Charaka, the Shrushrita, who's been, the father of Indian surgery, and so on and so forth. We have many, many texts. So if in case you are interested in any systems of medicine, be it Ayurveda, the Siddha, the Unani, or even so Rigpa, it's also called the Tibetan system of medicine, I would urge you to look at the TKDL website. And if you go to the link on the sources, you will see innumerable number of books that we have covered so far. And I'm, very happy to say that we are still yet to cover many other books as well. So that's a huge and vast, resource base that we have with regards to our Indian knowledge system, specifically on the Indian systems of medicine. Professor Murthy, in his presentation, talked to you about Jivaka, the physician to Lord Buddha. We have heard about Charaka, we have heard about Shushrita, we have heard about Vagbhata, but there are many, many others also who have actively participated, being the proponents of these Indian systems of medicine, and they have made, unique interventions that even today we can refer to and feel proud that, it's part of our Indian heritage. So Jivaka, being the physician to Lord Buddha, is also known for creating nasyas for headache. Nasyas are basically, interventions or formulations that are put in the nostrils. Today we call it as, nasal drops and things like that. So this was created way back in during his time, And he is also known to cure King Bimbisara from hemorrhoids by putting medicine under the nails and using medicated ointments. So just think of such cures, perhaps, in today's context, as Professor Murthy mentioned, people may call it pseudoscience, but, that the kings lived even after all these medications indicates that there is some validity in all of it. Perhaps in today's context, like how human beings have evolved, even plants could have evolved, and we may need to validate and titrate all these medications to suit the current range. But these are all valid sciences with solid, I would say, evidence in terms of its usage as well. So Jivaka is also known to have done the first brain surgery, and he had removed 2 large worms from the brain. Just imagine in today's context, without MRI, CT, we cannot even think of having a brain surgery. And Jivaka, during the days of Lord Buddha, has done brain surgery and removed worms that caused, repeated and recurrent headaches in a woman. The Jivaka, the physician, also seems to have cured Pradyul of pernicious anemia, that is Pandu disease, by using Gritha with the Kashaya Rasa. And Lord Buddha himself has, I think there is some problem. They say they're not able to hear me. Is it true, Piyush?
No, madam, your voice is clear. I'm checking.
You're audible, ma'am.
All right, there's no disturbance, right?
No, no disturbance at all.
All right. Okay, thank you. So Jivaka was also known to even treat Lord Buddha of toxins in his body because of blocked intestines. Okay, so all he had given Lord Buddha was mild purgation handful of lotuses to inhale, and based on the treatment that was provided, like Buddha was treated and cured of this blocked intestines, and he could move forward. And continuing with the Indian systems of medicine, I'm sure all of you are aware of Amla. It is one of the most important and extensively studied plant, not only in those olden days, but also today. It happens to balance the Tridosha, that is Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. So here, Amlaki can be used in the fresh fruit pulp form or the dried fruit. And the therapeutic effects or uses of either of the formulations are, it treats Rakta Pitta, Amla Pitta, Prameha, and Daha. And also it is known to be used in a variety of afflictions, human afflictions. It has both antioxidant and anti-inflammatory actions, thereby it provides for immunity enhancement. Rasayana as a rejuvenating tonic. It provides relief against acidity, constipation, improves the digestive system as well as the appetite. It is also useful for diabetes, improving eyesight, maintaining good hair and skin, among many other uses. So the beauty of all the systems of medicine, that when we talk of the traditional systems of medicine, is that you take one particular drug. So in this case, I give you an example of Triphala, which happens to be a polyherbal formulation. It is of three fruits, that is Amla, Bibitaki, and Haritaki. So when you combine all this, you get Triphala, depending on the carrier. That is, when I use Triphala with sugar, it is known to cure acid peptic disease. If I use Triphala with honey, it is good for kapha diseases. If I use Triphala with rock salt, it is good for vata diseases. If I use it with decoction, it is good for liver diseases. With the oil or ghee, it is used for ulcers or even eyesight traumata. A single drug, depending on what the carrier is and the way it is given, it can cure different afflictions of the human. Whereas when I talk of a single, plant, take Gudichi, Tinospora cordifolia, again, depending on the carrier, if I talk of ghee, it is good for Vata Vikara. If I talk of using Gudichi with Madhu, that is honey, it is good for Kapha Vikara. And if I use it with Erendithylam, that is castor oil, it is good for Vata Rakta diseases. So the beauty of our systems of medicine, I told you, right, what I'm going to provide is only giving you a glimpse of the expanse of our Indian knowledge systems. You can understand that, how well all this has been observed and used in the earlier days to prevent and treat human afflictions and diseases. So again, giving one example of one particular disease and the different systems of medicine and the interventions available, I talk of vitiligo. What is vitiligo? It's a skin disorder. And what happens? There is either a partial or complete loss of melanocytes leading to patches. The problem with vitiligo is it causes social stigma because, there is a decoloration of your skin, and especially, people feel kind of, very self-conscious to go out because they think that there is something ugly about them. So this particular vitiligo seems to have been known in earlier days also, and there are innumerable number of interventions recommended for treating vitiligo. You take Ayurveda, it says that decoction, that is part made of Ficus hispida, Pterocarpus marsupium, and many other herbs can be, taken along with jaggery. So this is one treatment from Ayurveda. You take up Unani, again, different herbs, Ami Majuslin, Sorali corlifolia, Punica granatum. Many herbs have been, indicated to treat Unani. Similarly, in Siddha also you have Nunakadaga, you have Annabedi Chanduram, you have many other Ponnangani Karpam, many other, herbal formulations that has been recommended for treating vitiligo. Not only the Ayurveda, Siddha and Unani, there are even folk treatments, such as the oral traditional knowledge, right? So among the folk traditions, red clays found by the riverside has been mixed with ginger juice and used for treating vitiligo. the folk healers have used powdered radish seeds with vinegar and tried to treat vitiligo and so on and so forth. So this kind of gives you a glimpse of, how vast and diverse our traditional systems of medicine is. And it kind of holds a huge reservoir of knowledge that we can pick and then do perhaps further research and innovate on what is already the foundation laid through our Indian systems of medicine to treat the current afflictions and also to address the current unmet medical needs. What is an example of what is, not so very commonly known to the public as the Pushpa Ayurveda? I did mention in the earlier slide, that Jivaka, the physician to Buddha, treated his blocked intestines by giving a handful of lotuses and asking Lord Buddha to inhale the fragrance coming out of the lotuses. So this is a form of Pushpa Ayurveda. So there is a treatise, that has been put together by Ugraditya Acharya, a Jain physician of the 9th century. It is called the Kalyana Karaka. It's an old Carnatic script, and it provides a preparation of Rasayana medicines with about 18,000 kinds of flowers. Okay. All I'm trying to do here is to provide you a glimpse of the vastness of our Indian knowledge systems, which could be useful to any of you to do further research and take up the further interventions for the welfare of everybody. So here, when you talk of Pushpa Ayurveda, there are 5 Vidhanams that are generally mentioned. What are those? Darshanam. Darshanam is what you look at the flower. You concentrate by looking at the flower, and that provides for some therapeutic benefits. So if I look at Rakta Mandara, that is hibiscus, it is known to treat Vata Roga joint pains. If I look at Arakvada, that is Cassia fistula, it is indicated to be useful in constipation. The second is the Sparsha Vidhana. It is you're made to touch the flower. That is, you're advised to wear the garments made of flowers, put on a cap, perhaps wear a bracelet or a necklace, or sometimes you're also asked to sleep on a bed of flowers. Okay, this is Sparsha Vidhana. The third type is the Alepana Vidhana. Okay, you have flowers simply or mixed with some other medicated drugs are ground into a pulp, and this is applied on the body. So this is again used for some therapeutic benefits. The fourth one is the Agrana Vidhana or Nasya Vidhana. So anyway, when you talk of Nasya, it is all about the nasal drop. So in here, depending on the ingredients of the flower, it could be mild, that is Mantha, medium Madhya, super is Tivra or Nirgandha. So even Nirgandha flowers are being used for the purpose. The fifth one is the Ashwadhana Vidhana, that is consuming flowers. And when you consume flowers, it could be rasa, that is extract. It could be hima, the flower essence is taken out after soaking it in water. Bath, that is decoction, arka is distilled extract, asava is fermented flowers, and so on and so forth. So these are all the different ways flowers have been used for treating human diseases. Not only have our ancestors been good in, talking of only drugs and, herbal formulations or even herbal mineral formulations. I think in India, we've been a very beauty conscious country way back since our ancestral times. And there is a book that I had laid my hands on. It's called The Herbal Cosmetics in Ancient India. It's in English and it is available on archive.org for people who are interested. In addition to this book, which talks about facial cosmetics, oral hygiene, depilatories, body cosmetics, cosmetics for the hair, just imagine, the way they had gone about identifying the needs and then addressing the needs through herbal or herbal mineral formulations. In addition to that, you have Puranas, the Mahabharatas, Charak Samhita, Shashra Samhita, and many other books that talks about the cosmetics and other, FMCG products of today that have been mentioned in these ancient texts. Just to kind of give you a glimpse from the Ashtanga Hridaya, when you talk of pimples, I'm sure, when you are young, you tend to have a lot of pimples, the acne, and there is a particular, this one mentioned, treatment mentioned for pimples here. what they do is that they take a paste of the drugs that is Rodra, Stumburu, and Bacha, and it is used for Mukhadushika, that is called the pimples. Or you take a paste of the tender Lisa Vata and Narikela Sukti, and this is used again for pimples. Not only that, people have also, our ancestors have also recommended interventions for addressing premature graying of hair. They take iron powder, powder of Ringraja, Trifela, and Krishna Mritika. They keep this, they mix it together, soak it in the juice of sugarcane for 1 month, and once it is fermented, they use this for treating palita, that is the premature grayed hair. In terms of hair growth promotion also, you have interventions that have been mentioned. So this is to say that when you talk of our Indian systems of medicine, not everything can be treated as or called as pseudoscience, because nobody would go in to say that these are the specific plants used for a specific purpose. Because if one has to just create something, they would have used it at random. But here there is a mention of not only which are the ingredients, but how it is to be used and for which purpose it is to be used. Talking of health and hygiene, the discussion would get incomplete without mention of the perfumes. So again, traditional perfumes have been mentioned in our ancient texts. You go to Varahamita's Brihat Samhita. There are English translations available across all these texts. So here you have the Gandharva and the Yukti, I think. Yeah. So here what they do is that from one of the shlokas, that is shloka number 10, they have identified 9 different ingredients, that is Harita, Shankha, Gana, Thrava, Guda, Utpala, and Sailaka and Mashta. And they say that you can prepare almost close to 3.6 lakh for, different perfumes by using a combination of these ingredients. So what they say is that from the 9 ingredients, you take 1 to 9 parts of each, and no mixture can contain the same number of parts of any 2 substances. And by going by the permutation and combination of these 9 ingredients, you arrive at 1 into 2 into 3 into 4 into 5 into 6 into 7 into 8 into 9. That is almost 3.6 lakh formulae. The different formulations, the perfumery formulations can be possible. Similarly, the shlokas 13 to 14 that talks of the Gandharva, that is the perfumery ocean, they have mentioned 16 substances. You can take any 4 of these ingredients and mix them, and again making sure that not one ingredient is used in the same combination as any other. And when you go for the permutation and combination, you arrive at a number of 1.7 lakh perfumery combinations possible with these 16 ingredients. And all of this is available in Brihat Samhita. So when you talk of systems of medicine, and I've largely referred to herbal ingredients, so this is when you talk of agriculture, it is not very surprising that India had excelled within agricultural practices. Professor Murthy, in his presentation, talked largely about how agriculture was practiced even in ancient times. He also touched upon the astronomy and the astrological aspects of, how the agricultural practices were undertaken in those days. So even if you refer to Parashara, he says, may the farmers be happy, healthy, and wealthy. That is what he mentioned. So farmers have been the foundation of what we are today, what India is today. So again, even in agriculture, there are number of books that are available, starting from Krishi Parashara to Arthashastra, Brihat Samhita, Mahabhashya, and of course, specific books like Kashyapa, Krishi Shukti, Sirpala's Vriksha Ayurveda, Purpakara, many more. In addition to that, while these are all from the manuscripts and later codified into the book form, we also have the oral traditional knowledge. Okay, and this is still being passed on from one generation to the other. And in today's context, they are largely practiced in the rural areas. So what the Indian Council of Agricultural Research, that is ICR, had done is they had brought out an inventory of all these traditional indigenous practices, and there are 7 volumes of it. This is again available on the ICR website. I urge you to look at it. Not only have they gathered and documented this information, they have also validated many of these ITKs. So there is a particular book that talks about, that is document number 4, talks about the cross validation. So they had taken 38 ITKs, and in 23 of them they did multi-locational trials, and 15 of them were single center experiments. And they have seen that these ITKs are as good as the conventional or contemporary practices, perhaps with a little bit of a cost-benefit ratio differences. So to move on, when we talk of traditional agriculture, in today's context, I'm sure many of you may have heard or not heard about it. India has been the home to the world's oldest fermented liquid manure, and it is called the Gunab Jala. So earlier in the text of Vriksha Ayurveda or Krishi Parashara, the Gunab Jala that was mentioned was made out of all the waste from the farmer's household. It could be animal bones, it could be the marrow, the blood, the fish, or even the plant waste such as a sesame cake or the germinated oat cream and so on and so forth. But over time, because traditional knowledge is never static, it is dynamic, it changes to address the needs of that particular time and period. So in 2004 and later, the Asian Agri History Foundation in 2012 developed the herbal Gunab Jala, and here they added weeds to it in place of the animal waste, and these weeds added to the properties of the Gunab Jala by providing fungicidal as well as the insecticidal properties. They tested this Gunab Jala, herbal Gunab Jala, across various different crops, be it vegetables, fruits, or even field crops and tea, and they found that the productivity increases between 20 to 30%. So this has been from the Asian Agri History Foundation. Yet again, I urge all of you to look up these websites for more information for learning and as well as use and research. So if you go back and look at the Gunab Jala, I myself was very surprised to see that it's not just one Gunab Jala that was mentioned, because it all relates to the local resources that are available at any farmer's place, So some of the few examples that I could lay my hands on is about in safari, that is the Gunab Jala made out of safari fish, Mushika Kunapa, that is using the dead rats and cow urine, Kukuta Kunapa using the chicken flesh and cow urine, Sarangadhara Gunab Jala, where the flesh, fat, bone, marrow of many animals are used in a fermented format as the manure, and then Shashagavya, which is cow dung, cow urine, weeds and plants are used. And many of these Gunab Jalas have been validated scientifically. And this slide, I'll not go into the details of it, but to say that it's not just by word of mouth, we are saying that the Gunab Jalas have value, but to say that they have been scientifically validated and each has been found to contribute to productivity increase. So this is how, when we talk of traditional knowledge today, it is to see how we can further validate it or further do any further research on it and make sure that this is useful for today's context, by integrating it with the contemporary agricultural practices. Similarly, when you go back and look at the ancient texts, there is in Vriksha Ayurveda, there is a mention of improving seed germination. People from the agricultural domain would realize that not all the seeds are, having the similar propensity to germinate. There are some with, very hard pericarp which can't be germinated easily. So in this Vriksha Ayurveda, talks about germination of hard seeds. such as tamarind or any other thing. What they say is that you take the seed, put it in water, mix it with the powder of Triphala. I mentioned Triphala for human afflictions. You see, again, it is used in Briksha Ayurveda also for plant health. They also add barley and black gram and then soak it with turmeric, for a long time. And then they go and plant it, and this helps in seed germination. Similarly, grafting, was not long ago. So the Varahamita's Brihat Samhita, he talks about grafting when they had to transport plants from one place to the other. So the shloka reads as the trees can be taken to other countries and they're grafted on others if they are smeared from root to the stem with ghee, edapocon, sesamum, honey, vidanga, milk, and cow dung. This is again my attempt here is to only provide you a glimpse of what's available in our ancient text to see if you would better appreciate it and also use it for your research as it may be in future. So when we talk of traditional knowledge systems, I keep telling that we have the codified text and we also have the oral knowledge systems. So here I give you an example of the oral knowledge systems. So in the Navapada district of Orissa, farmers use a local method for treating the foot and mouth disease in cattle. Foot and mouth disease in cattle is a highly prevalent disease and it affects the productivity of the cows, the cattle. So what the farmers do is that they take harita and behda powder and mix it in water and apply it after boiling it. So what the scientists from ICR had done is that I said, right, they had gone to validate many of these traditional practices. So the validation happened by taking 5 different groups. Okay, the first group was the untreated control. The second group was using the ITK method, that is the Harida and Bahida. The third group was treating it with the barks of the Kerala tree. The fourth one was using neem oil because it is known to have antifungal activities as well as antimicrobial activities. And then the last one is the conventional therapy, that is Vaxivate. So what this group of scientists from the Department of Veterinary Medicine, Ethics and Jurisprudence from West Bengal University of Animal and Fishery Sciences did is they had done this experiment and found that the traditional method of using Harita and Behda was as effective as a conventional therapy. The only difference coming that if you use the ITK method, it takes almost 56 days to recover. Whereas if you go for Vaxivate, the conventional therapy, you just need about 4 to 5 days using veterinary medicine. So one another example of validating the ITK by the ICR is about enhancing aquaculture by using banana pseudostems. And what they found is that by using banana pseudostems in water, the good fish growth can be enhanced because that allows for enhancing the mineral components such as zinc, copper, calcium, iron, magnesium, manganese, and phosphate in the water. It increases the pH and the hardness and alkalinity of the pond water. And by doing that, it provides for increased pH, oxygenation, plankton protection, and therefore the productivity of fish is also enhanced. This is again a local tradition that is being followed in the Ganjam district of Orissa. When you talk of agriculture, you have to touch upon water because water is a very, very important resource when you talk of crop cultivation and productivity. So when you look at the water conservation methods known in our traditional literature, I have mentioned everywhere the reference which I have used to make these slides. I request all of you to also please refer to that. So when you talk of these conventional practices, these appropriate structures and methods were developed, and these were all location specific, climate specific, rainfall specific, the soil and local materials also were specific to that particular region. So if you right from the Trans-Himalayan to the Western Himalayan or Eastern Himalayan, so or any other places, there are very, very specific water conservation methods that have been recommended and used. You take of Ladakh, it is the zinc. When you talk of the Western Himalayas, it is the Kul, Nala, Khatris or Kul. In the Eastern Himalayas, it is the Apatani. When you go to the Indo-Gangetic plains, again, there is a different way in which the water was conserved. There's a catchment basin or canals are, put in place. Sometimes it is the Baolis, I think Professor Murthy also showed you a picture of a Baoli. And, these are all the different methods that are used to kind of, conserve water, because our ancestors were, I think kind of were very mindful of the respect for nature and also respect for conserving and sustainable use of natural resources. So in the Western Ghats, you have the Surangam, in the Western coastal plains, you have the Veddas, and so on and so forth. So these are the different water conservation methods. Anything that we do for agriculture or water all relates to what? Good, providing us food. So human generation passes on. So we also have extremely good books that have listed out our traditional practices related to food and nutrition. Some of the books are Pakadarpanam and Maharaja Nala, Supashastra by Mankarasa, Bhojana Kutuhala by Raghunatha Ganesha, Kshema Kutuhala by Kshema Sarma, and so on and so forth. Just to give you an example of what are the contents in a particular book, I take the example of Kshema Kutuhala. It's about the dietetics and culinary art, that is Pakashastra and Pakakala. There are 12 utsavas, that is chapters that are mentioned, right from the Dravya Pakas to what are the utensils that are used, what should be the qualities of the physician and cook, the seasons and routines to follow, to all those preparations, be it non-vegetarian preparations or vegetarian preparations or even appetizers, everything has been mentioned in detail. So I think, whereas in the interest of time, I could move forward. If you go to Pakadarpana, they are clearly mentioning which food is prepared how and whether it has any other benefits besides just for nutrition. Say, for example, if I talk about the right side of my slide, that is Asita Pulastara Nirvana Vidhi Gurnashaha. That is Krishna Kurati Rasa Varanika Vidhi. So here it says that this particular, the dal that is prepared, okay, this is not only good for providing for nutrition, but it is also good for Vata Vikara, it is also good for Kapha Vikara, and it is also used for taking care of ailments related to this Vata and Kapha Vikaras. So the food was used, as they, in earlier days, they used to say, food is medicine. So if you had good food, you would know, you would not eat medicines to treat your the diseases of the human body. Similarly, not only the food, even the way, the formats of food preparation as well as serving was also treated very important. So, for example, if you may have the clay vessels to the metal vessels like iron vessels or even stone vessels, and copper, of course, was also used. Brass was used. These are all the different formats in which the food was cooked. And the foods were also served, perhaps, the plantain leaves or the bastard leaf or even the castor bean leaf and so on and so forth. And everything is also associated not only with, the cordial way in which food was served, but also in terms of its medicinal value. If you talk of the plantain leaf, it is also used for treating tiredness and cold. If you talk of the castor bean, it is, serving on a castor bean helps in killing worms and treating fever. It is also beneficial for eyes and digestion. And lotus petals, again, it is used for removing weariness, fatigue, and so on and so forth. So there are values not only in terms of food, but also in terms of its medicinal properties. When we talk of, the metallurgy, where we talked about utensils being, made of iron or perhaps bronze or copper or brass. We talk about metallurgy. So the ancient Indian metallurgy is extremely well known, because when you talk of metallurgy, I think the first very important example comes as the iron pillar of Delhi. It is unrusted even today, and anybody who visits Delhi definitely goes and visits the iron pillar to see the magnificence of the, the pillar, right? And so when we talk of metallurgy, India not only excelled in creating such pillars, but also in terms of, steel. I'm sure, some of you would have heard about the Damascus sword. The Damascus sword is made out of a steel material, which provides it with an ease of cutting a silk scarf as easily as that of any other, perhaps even a human head. And where did this wood steel come from? This is again from South India. In today's terminology, the wood steel is a high-grade, ultra-high carbon steel produced by the crucible processes in South India. So how do they do? First, they create the porous iron, they hammer it when it is still hot, and once while they are hammering it, they add some wood chips, because this provides the carbon required for making the steel hard. And then, while they are heating it, carbon is deposited inside of the iron, and the steel thus produced will have a uniform composition of about 1.1 to 1.6 carbon, and this provides for this high-grade, ultra-high carbon steel. And the wood steel has been used for the Damascus swords, and which are very, very famous. Yet again, or perhaps unlike the earlier subject domains that I had mentioned, metallurgy of India does not have a focused text, because when I talked about medicine, I talked about Shushruta Samhita, Charak Samhita, Ashtanga Hridaya, and so on and so forth. I talked about Krishi Parashara, I talked about Vriksha Ayurveda, I talked about Lokopakara, or even Pakatarpanam when I talked about agriculture and food. But when you talk of metallurgy, it is all kind of everywhere, right from the Rig Vedas to, Arthashastra to, other books like Ramayana, Mahabharata, you have a mention of the metallurgy. And of course, you do have some focus places like Rasatnava, Ratna Samuchaya, and so on and so forth, to identify a mention of metallurgy in our Indian text. So while we talk about the codified text, again, when we talk of metallurgy, there's a lot of metallurgical practices that are limited to local oral traditional knowledge. Some of them are examples from Kerala. So when you talk of the metal alloys, the bronzes from Kerala are very, very important. One very, very important example is the Arunmula metal mirror, which is still being made in Kerala. And this is a metal mirror, no glass is used, and the reflection is so beautiful that you would see yourself exactly how you are in that particular mirror. And what does this contain? It contains tin, it contains phosphorus, it contains zinc, iron, nickel, and copper. And this is made only by a particular family in Kerala. Similarly, you also have the bell metal alloys from Kerala, the Kadavallur eating bond, or the Swami Malay and Mannarakis, which have very, very specific way in which the alloys are made, either by the repeated thermomechanical processing or by the lost wax processes. And these alloys, the content of the different major metals or the minor ones are so very specific that it is kind of very difficult to kind of replicate it in other places. So it all talks about how the local resources have been used for addressing the needs of the people in a particular region. India did not excel only in all these, traditional food, medicine, agriculture, and all that. India has also been known for the architecture, the sculpture, and so on and so forth. The Tanjavur Brihadishwara temple is a beautiful example of how our artistic excellence is shown, not only in terms of the architecture, sculpture, and also the inscriptions within the temple. In fact, people who are interested on understanding the Brihadishwara temple, there is a multimedia DVD available at the IGNCA. Please have a look at it. It talks about, every aspect of the temple, the uniqueness and the specific a matter related to the temple, and it talks about the linga, the sculptures, what is the central sanctum containing, and even it talks about the dance karanas in the of the Bharata Natya Shastra in the particular temple. So if this is one hymn of our architectural prowess, the other ones are more simple structures. You talk of the Tabo mud monastery in the Spiti Valley. This is a 10th century mud building. It is still standing strong today. This particular monastery was made by blending raw earth, water, and fibrous material like straw. Even now today, you have a valuable collection of frescoes, that is the mural paintings, and tankas, that is the scroll paintings adorning the walls of the monastery. And it is the oldest operating Buddhist structure in the Himalayas. It's called the Ajanta of the Himalayas. To talk of the bungas, okay, these are largely the local structures made in the Gujarat region. And these bungas are, circular structures made of mud bricks. Sometimes they use, the ring beams on the walls to kind of make it stable. And this was a, intervention that was used after the deadly earthquake in 2001. It was very important to bring together livelihoods again for rebuilding the area after the earthquake or even after the Kosi floods in Bihar. And bungas were made in lakhs to help the families get back to their feet again. So these are all largely from, when we talk of science and technology and so on and so forth. But nevertheless, to say that art and culture has been a very, very important aspect of Indian lives. And there's a particular paper that talks about 52 incredible Indian folk arts. Again, we have many, many more to say that we have to protect the Indian art and culture. And Indian art and culture is not just related to paintings and making sculptures or idols. It's all about performing arts as well. Dance, music, and theater has been used not only for entertainment purposes, but also to cover societal themes. It could be health, it could be environment, it could be literacy, and so on and so forth. Some examples are there. Yakshagana from Karnataka, Bharatanatyam from South India, and also the classical music therapies, be it Carnatic music or Hindustani. They have all been found to have a huge connect either as a therapeutic tool or into creating social consciousness. So the languages again become very important, because if we are to now document oral traditional knowledge into a codified form, language is important, the scripts are important. We are on the verge of losing many, many languages in the country because we have moved away from our, the ancestral traditions and culture. So the government of India is yet again doing quite a bit to revive these languages. 82 language primers have been identified by the Ministry of Tribal Affairs, and there are a lot of efforts going on to secure these languages. So I'm almost to the end of it to say that, all I had tried to provide today is an expanse and significance of our Indian knowledge systems. And as Professor Murthy mentioned, we are talking of Anumana and as well as Pramana. But to say that, our Indian systems, ancient systems have largely been based on the science and art of logic and debate by the Tarka Vidya, Vada Vidya, and also the Siddhanta, Hetu, reasoning has been important. Udharma, that is both Sadharmya and Vaidharmya have been important. Even the Jataka tales talks about 64 kalas, that is art and crafts, and the students were taught not only the subject areas, but also music, dance, sculpture, metallurgy, architecture, so on and so forth, to say that when you talk about holistic development, you need to have or at least know most of these aspects so that you know that life is not all about learning one particular subject domain, but to understand life as a whole, you need to know a little beyond, and that is what interdisciplinary science and technology or even interdisciplinary subject matter is. Even when I talk of Charaka Samhita, it says logic in medicine is as essential as is another subject. And Shushruta clearly says that a physician, by knowing only medicine, cannot perform his job, right? He has to learn when you talk of Ayurveda, one needs to know about the plants in the forest. So those days, I believe, unless the student goes and identifies the right plants in the forest, he or she would not be allowed to practice medicine. So that is how important it is to have an interdisciplinary approach to life. And I will stop here without going any further to say that when you talk of the national education policy and the national IPR policy, our Indian knowledge systems are very, very important. We'll get to know more about the TKDL in the next sessions of the workshop. And to say today that UGC has provided guidance for incorporating IKS in your curriculum. ACTI has also provided guidance on including minor degree in universal human values, huge opportunities to you through the IKS division of the Ministry of Education. Let us all come together to protect, preserve, and promote our traditional customs of our country. Thank you. Thank you so much for your patient listening.
Thank you very much, ma'am, for delivering an informative lecture. So it was just a Divya Tirth Yatra virtual tour of traditional knowledge. So always you do. So we can go to the assessment session first, then we will come back to question and answer. Astu?
Sure.
So we are sharing the yes in the chat box. I have shared the link. Please take 10 minutes and complete this assessment. Then we'll come back to question and answer session. Astu? So it's 16. So up to 26. 5:26 will be. So I am sharing the link again and again for your easy reference. Please complete your assessment. There are 5 questions. Please complete and submit before the deadline 5:26. Please copy the link and use in your device. Done. Yes, it's working. Please copy the link and use in your device. That would be very helpful to open the link. Thank you. Yes, I'm sending the link. So I will keep the link open up to 5:26. Please submit your assignment by 5:25. Thank you. So whoever are not able to open the link, please copy the link and use in Google Chrome and any other device. Please copy link and use in your device. Done. So after this assessment session, we'll move to the question and answer session. If you have any doubt, questions, please be here. Then we can discuss. Otherwise, you can leave. Send the link again. Okay. Yes, you can leave. If you don't have any doubt or questions, you may leave. And tomorrow we'll have the session in the same time, 3:30. Regarding PPT, I will upload the PPT in the Google Drive, which you have received already. 2 minutes left. You may leave if you don't have any doubt or question, query. Yes, tomorrow, the same time. Same time. The session will start at the same time, 3:30. For feedback form we will share at the end of the workshop, on the final day. Okay. Time is up. So I hope everyone has submitted the assessment. Please submit. Yes. So we can move to the next session, question and answer session. So here Arya is here. Pranam Arya. Pranamaha. न श्रूयते
Namaste, namaste, and namaste to
इदानीं श्रूयते इदानीं
Vishwadhaniji, Anandji, Professor Murthyji. Thank you very much. And to all the participants, wonderful to have your participation for this session. So I'm sure you've had a very good, it's quite noisy here. So I'll stop here. Thank you. All the
Yes.
best.
So
I am.
So we request all the participants, please raise your digital hand if you have any doubt or query. Please, we can unmute. In between, ma'am, we can start with 1-2 question here.
There is one question from Megha Shri.
Yes.
She is asking, is documentation of traditional knowledge conserve the knowledge? What was the role of present generation in conservation?
The answer is yes. If you document the knowledge, it would get conserved, like how we are seeing today. It's easy to access codified traditional knowledge compared to oral traditional knowledge. I just gave you examples of the different books related to Ayurveda, Siddha, Unani, and also agriculture, food, and so on and so forth. And in terms of the oral traditional knowledge, yes, all of us have a very important role because there's an African proverb. They say when an old man dies, the library burns to the ground. And I think that's really, really true because especially considering today's interest in traditional knowledge, and if we lose those old people, they'll also lose the knowledge along with them. So it's important that youngsters do pick up on these aspects. See if in case you can go get the permission of the knowledge holders and document that knowledge. You'll get to hear more about documenting oral traditional knowledge perhaps on day 3 and 4. And 4, we'll talk about the ethical aspects of it. Yes, it is important that we document knowledge to make it, to preserve it for future.
So we have another question from S. Brahada Prasanna. So the question is, could you please mention the website to be visited in relation to this medicinal treatment?
TKDL website I talked about with regards to the books. In the TKDL, what we do is that we document traditional knowledge in a format that everybody can understand. The TKDL, the entire collection is not available to everybody, but 1,250 formulations are available. But the source of information for all the contents of the TKDL we have provided at what do you say, on the TKDL site. What is that particular aspect? This one called, I think, source of information. Okay, if you click on the source of information tab, you'll be able to get all the books that we have covered so far in the TKDL.
So the another question is from Amruta Gangakedkar. And the question is like, can you please share the list of traditional literature for architecture, space planning and Vastu?
That IKS division, Piyush, do you have anything? Because in the TKDL so far we have not covered architecture, but I'm sure you may have.
Yes, we in our website there is a list of resource books. So I think it's a knowledge repository. If you go to the tab knowledge repository, there is a list of books. You can find different books on agriculture or Vastu Shastra, whatever. I think that would be helpful. Only sir, your voice is not audible.
Okay. The another question is from Kumar Jyoti Nandi. And the question is like, I wish to know, is there any treatise where there are mentioned where to plant which trees, plants around a building or in a site?
Yes, there are books that are talk about it. I'm not sure of the title, but I think Vriksha Ayurved, Krishi Parashara, and Krishi Shukti also cover these aspects related to what needs to be planted when and where and how, all those details. Even Brihat Samhita also covers many aspects of this.
Another question is like, what is cognitive knowledge? Explain with examples.
Cognitive knowledge. I think Anuradha, you may want to attempt this.
I'll just tell this. So cognitive knowledge, when we're talking of cognitive knowledge, we are basically referring to that knowledge system which has to do with the thought component. How do you know something rather than a hands-on skill-based knowledge? So there are many knowledge traditions which are like hands-on things you need to do. But cognitive knowledge traditions would have to do more with the intellectual applications and the intellectual understanding of different subjects. We would be referring to those. So like philosophy and all would come into possibly more of the cognitive one, or each knowledge dimension would also have a cognitive part and there is a hands-on part, where the theory part of it, the intellectual exploration of that topic would come under the domain of cognitive knowledge.
Dr. Sandeep Sagar is asking, does TKDL encompass all aspects of traditional knowledge, or is it limited to documenting medicinal knowledge?
Right now, we are focused on Indian systems of medicine. It covers Ayurveda, Siddha, Unani, Sovarika, and yoga practices. We just started work in agriculture and metallurgy. We are still to include content in the TKDA. So it's a limited focus project.
We are done with the chat, so we
No,
can
I was just wondering, and
request.
possibly
Yes.
this is the area where we need experts. We've got so many experts who've joined us, and we really need them to do the research into these knowledge domains so that then they can become part of the team. Like right now,
Sure.
I think as TKDL, the thing is that right now there's a lot of work on medicine that has happened, and therefore it's easy for us to start trying to document whatever is there. because it is, after all, a digital library that is documenting and looking after these rights issues. But the more research there is on the varied domains of knowledge that exist, like you said, metallurgy, but there can be so many. There can be textiles, there can be just the food, culinary recipes, there can be perfume making. There can be just so many subjects that need detailed investigation or documentation based on the community practices. So when we have more details on that, then we can, I'm sure TKDL would be more than happy to expand its domain.
True.
Krish, there is a comment from them. I mean, it is like what I think is that we should not publish the knowledge. It will be used by others like it was done by the foreigners earlier. It should be regulated with security. What is your opinion on this?
It's a mixed response, I would say, because what we talk about Indian philosophy is Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. So whatever is knowledge, we tend to share with everyone so that it is for the benefit of all. Having said that, in today's competitive world, yes, we need to be careful because there are a lot of these intellectual property rights that are being filed on known subject matter. So the ownership changes when somebody wrongfully seeks ownership of that. Unless we say that this is already ours and provide evidence, the patent officers or the intellectual property officers do not take cognizance of it. We'll get to hear more about this particular aspect of protecting our rights in the day 3 and day 4 of this workshop. So please hold on to your patience for a few more days.
So, can you take a audio question here?
Yes, we'll take 2 questions and then stop at that,
Yes.
Piyush.
Kumarji, could you please ask your question? Hello.
मैंने पूछ लिया था ग्रुप में ही और
Okay.
एक्चुअली फ्रॉम द पर्सपेक्टिव ऑफ वास्तु व्हाट आर द प्लान्स टू बी प्लांटेड अराउंड द बिल्डिंग एंड साइट विद रिस्पेक्ट टू वास्तु शिल्प शास्त्र मतलब ऐसा कुछ किताब है क्या so that we can refer as a research scholar.
From
There
the
is-
agriculture point of view, I had mentioned those few books, right? So those contain both, from the weather aspects and as well as the astrology aspects they have mentioned. But from a Vastu perspective, we are not the subject
No,
experts.
we have a list of books and there are a few projects are going on Vastu Shastra. So
Oh,
if you look into our website, there would be the information. I think you will get information from that project only.
okay ma'am.
And sorry,
Ma'am,
can I also add? Can I also add? There is one
yes ma'am.
Yes.
Transdisciplinary University, TDU in Bangalore.
Okay
And
ma'am.
they have done a lot of work around different plant types. What are the plants that go with what, their medicinal properties, etc. So if you look up their website, they have one of the biggest repositories of plants and their
He's talking from aspect of Vastu, Anuradha.
Ma'am, I actually got 2 books. If one is that Upavan Vinodar, Girija Prasanna Majumdar, and another is Panchavati by Banwari. I don't know whether you have heard of it.
There is this Asian Agri History Foundation. I would urge you to look up their website also. They have also translated those books into English and Hindi. And
Yes, ma'am.
that you have mentioned, I do recall that they have a specific book on gardens, and which plant is to be,
Placed
planted where and
where?
all.
Where?
Yes, so you will get a lot of information from the Asian Agri History Foundation, and they sell the books also. So if you want to buy, they would be happy to provide you a copy.
Okay, ma'am. And ma'am, what is arbory horticulture? Arbory. In that book, it is mentioned it is a Sanskrit treatise on ARBORI. Arbory horticulture. Is it a specific term? Landscape term?
I have no idea. I'm sorry.
Okay, ma'am.
Maybe tomorrow I'll get back to you after contacting them.
Okay, ma'am. Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Sure.
Okay. So, ma'am.
Charuvati,
हाँ Charumati. Yes. Charumati ji.
No, I'm interested in research. I have a MA Sanskrit, MPhil Sanskrit. I have a BSc Statistics degree. So, is this? I heard of this weather forecast by that Parashu, Parashuram. Somebody was telling about this. So, is there any text where, because I have heard that statistics is important for any kind of forecast. So, it is not restricting to this particular. You may suggest me any potential area where I can choose any source as research in Sanskrit.
Well, Charupati ji, I don't think we will be the one to suggest you the research topic, because when you talk of research, it has to be something that comes from within you, your curiosity to kind of address. So I think you will have to look.
Yes, I have a few. Yes, just to know where can I find resources for this?
That we can help you. So if you can write either to the IKS division or to head TKDL, we will be able to connect with the experts and then come back to you. We can play
Yes,
the
that
role
is.
of a facilitator.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Yes, yes, sure. I have certain things. I will get back to you with the list of what is my area of interest.
That would be lovely. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ji. Dhanyawad.
Thank you. One last question.
Last. Namaste, Rajneesh Kumar ji. Could you please speak louder? No, we can't hear you. Last.
Maybe you can just put it in the chat box and we'll see
Yes.
if we can address. To all the participants who are still on board, I just wanted to clarify that when we talk of the link is not sent on email. The assessment link is posted here. Okay, in the chat box, you're supposed to copy that link and then put it on your, what do you say, the internet browser, and then access the link. So it is not being sent on email. So please don't waste time looking for an email. Just look into the chat box.
Astu, the last question we can try. Jyoti ji. Hello.
No, I think we have already answered him, right? Maybe he has not lowered the hand.
Neelam ji, could you please ask? Okay. Hello. No. Yes, Neelam ji. Hello, Neelam ji.
I think we'll stop here.
Okay,
We can
stop
assure
now.
our participants that, this is going to be a 5-day workshop. So if in case your questions are not answered today, you have 4 more days to communicate with us, and we will provide you with the opportunity to get your questions answered. In case you would want to write to us, use the emails that have been sent to you and then write to us and we will revert.
Yes. So now we can close. Pranam to all of you. We'll see tomorrow at the same time, 3:30. Now we can close with Shanti Mantra. Sarve bhavantu sukhina, sarve santu niramaya, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, मा कश्चित् दुःखभाग् भवेत्। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। ओम अस्तु प्रणामः।
Thank you, Piyush. Thank you, Anuradha. Thank you, Prasamurti.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Anil. Bye.